Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and jump in as we're getting cozy. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here, and for those of you that are joining us virtually. My name is Tammy Landis. I am the curator of post-war and contemporary glass here at the Corning Museum of Glass. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to this evening's program, Connected by Glass, which will be in the format of a panel discussion centered around our new exhibition, Disclosure, the Whiteness of Glass, by the artist collective Related Tactics, who is seated here next to me. First, I want to start by acknowledging that the museum is located upon the unceded seas territory of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, of which the Onondaga, the Seneca Nation, and the Gawainako, the Cayuga Nation, are a part. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy precedes the establishment of the museum, New York State, and the United States of America. The museum acknowledges the oppressive history inflicted upon and the continued dispossession of the Haudenosaunee people. We honor their ongoing connection to these lands and waters. We ask that all who are present virtually and present today to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that connects us all. This is a living land acknowledgement, and we will continue to revise and strengthen it as we continue to learn as an institution and in collaboration with others. Tonight's Connected by Glass program will be held in the format of a panel to further expand our engagement with the opening of Disclosure, the Whiteness of Glass, which is on view, opening today, in the Special Projects Gallery in the Contemporary Art and Design Wing here at the Corning Museum of Glass. Disclosure, the Whiteness of Glass is a research-based exhibition organized by the artist collective Related Tactics, composed of Michelle Carlson, Weston Teruya, and Nate Watson, that examines systematic racism, exclusion, and inequity in the field of glass. This exhibition, first shown at the Center for Craft in Asheville, North Carolina, was inspired by a 2020 essay written by Related Tactics and published by the Corning Museum of Glass in New Glass Review 41. The essay shared demographic data highlighting the lack of institutional representation of Black artists and artists of color working in glass. To further the impact of this data, Related Tactics then invited 13 artists of color to respond creatively in 3 stages that build upon one another. First, the visualizations, next, artist instructions, and third, came together as a collaborative studio session at the Tyler School of Art and Architecture of Temple University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. As we dive into the critical topics of this exhibition during the panel, please hold your questions until the end, where we will have time for Q&A. Our team has placed 2 microphones up at the front for those of you that are here in person with us. Please do use those at the end. And those of you that are participating virtually, please submit your questions in the chat function on Zoom, and we will get to those as well. Following this evening's panel, all who are present here in person are invited to join us up in the Special Projects Gallery, up in the Contemporary Art and Design Wing, for a special opening and preview of this exhibition. Those of you that are joining us virtually, I hope you can plan a time to come experience this as well, especially as you're seeing this panel today. I will say it's an exhibition that needs to be encountered in person, so those of you virtually, please come. I'd love to connect with you then. Before I introduce the artists, I want to offer a brief note of gratitude to the greater museum team, including leadership, exhibitions, and publications, who have thoughtfully supported and attended to this project in its entirety. I see each one of you, and I thank you deeply for your thought and care in seeing this project through. I joined this team only 2 weeks ago, and this project began well before my arrival, which leads me to acknowledging the exceptional work of Reese Peacock, who has served as the curatorial liaison for this project from the onset. And to the artists, related tactics. Thank you for cultivating this profound work in a format that can now be experienced as an exhibition. It is an honor to be a part of this moment in your collaborative practice. And to all of the artists who have participated in this project, I'm going to say each of their names. They should be on a slide. Victoria Amadizada Melendez, Einar and Jamex de la Torre, Cheryl Derricote, Pearl Dick, Rhea Friday, Vanessa German, Helen Lee, Emily Leach, Corey Pemberton, Shay Rhodes, Kimberly Thomas, and Joyce Scott. Thank you. We wish you could all be here with us in person tonight. I would now like to introduce the artists and participants of this evening's panel. Promise we're diving in now. Seated here on the stage is the Artist Collective Related Tactics, and I want to share briefly on each individual. In the center, Nate Watson currently lives and works in San Francisco as an artist, designer, and most recently held the role as executive director of the Bayview Arts nonprofit Public Glass. His work investigates a range of issues from equity and privilege to materiality and labor, with an emphasis on addressing complex social issues. Over to the right is Michelle. Michelle Carlson is a visual artist, writer, educator, and facilitator of projects ranging from conversations to publications to curatorial endeavors that use creative strategies to question systems of power and legacies of racialization. She is currently the Associate Professor of Printmaking at the Corcoran School of Arts and Design at George Washington University. And Weston, who's seated on the side, Weston Teruya is an artist, an arts advocate specializing in cultural equity funding and policy, as well as the producer of a podcast series interviewing artists of color about their practices. Moderating the panel today, so I'm going to move to our virtual participants, is participating artist Emily Leach. Emily explores issues related to Blackness, bodies, reproduction, growth, and language in her artistic practice. As the assistant director of the Glass Education Exchange, or GEEKS, Emily produces their annual lecture series. Thank you, Emily, for being our host today. Also joining us virtually are two artists who have worked together to create one of the vignettes that you will see when you go up to disclosure. First, we have Cheryl Derricote. She's an award-winning San Francisco-based visual artist, working primarily with images on glass and paper. For disclosure, Cheryl created the artist instructions for Pearl Dick that then Pearl went and created work. And Pearl Dick, who is also with us here virtually, is a glass artist and community builder based in Chicago, Illinois. She is the artistic director of Firebird Community Arts and co-founder of Project Fire, a program designed to promote healing through glass blowing for young people who have been injured by gun violence. Pearl created a studio interpretation inspired by Cheryl's instructions. Thank you all for being here, for being with us in this discussion. This is a really, really important moment here for the museum and to the broader glass field. I'm so glad that all of you are here virtually and in person. Thank you all for being present, all the artists and those who are here with us, and to discuss the varying ways and approaches that you have brought to realize disclosure, the whiteness of glass. To move into this evening's panel, I would now like to hand things over to Emily Leach. Thank you, Emily.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thanks for that introduction. Just a quick technical note. I can't see RT right now. Is there any way that we could get them on screen as well? And while that is happening, I just, really wanted to thank everybody for being here, and really grateful to be in conversation with everyone today. It's just such an exciting extension of this project, and I'm so excited to make it out to Corning to see this exhibition in person as well. So just to start, I was thinking that we could talk a little bit about related tactics, Cheryl and Pearl, you represent a chain between all three of you through the three stages of data visualizations to artist instructions to the manifestation in the studio. And so I wondered if we could start maybe with RT, just to kind of talk a little bit about that, then maybe move to Cheryl and then to Pearl to kind of talk about that experience of making.
This is how this works.
This
sometimes.
is how collectives
Yeah.
work.
Got it.
So maybe we'll start a little bit about the forming of the project a little bit and get into the mechanics. So this project really is what happens when you create space. And like was mentioned a little bit before, several years ago, kind of post-George Floyd, there were movements for social justice. And for a lot of people, that was the first time that we saw mass movements of collective action. And it felt very natural for us as an artist collective to kind of flow into that movement. And we saw ourselves reflected, but we also saw a place for us in our communities. What was happening around that time as well were big corporations and institutions were making promises and proclamations that they also were a part of this movement. And one thing that a lot of folks were doing where they were propping up images of Black and brown people saying, hey, like, we support you, we're part of this, you're part of this, we're part of what you're doing. And they were taking images of us out of context and placing them into places that were suiting them. And part of the way that we get into these spaces is when people co-opt things and it's not as sincere or like ingrained in the institutions as they claim or so the optics say. And so this project really started in a moment of, me personally, like being part of the Glass community and seeing my image and having that being kind of held up as like, hey, Nate's here. It made it look like I was everywhere, but there's so few of us that couldn't be. And so I went into conversation with colleagues and my friends who are here. And it was the moment that was hard. It's hard to even talk about now. But it was the action of the institutions also that made it a little bit more difficult. And so we started like reaching out to one another and speaking and talking. And one of the people who was like really part of this project from the beginning, who isn't here with us, is Susie Silbert. And Susie and I were talking as friends. And I think we were all looking for a way through that moment. And what happened was Susie created space in that new Glass review for us to insert, which is something that we do as a collective. Our take, our conversation, our dialogue. And what that writing, that catalyst for this project, what that really was, is also my friends, my colleagues, my collaborators surrounding me with care and support and saying, hey, like, if you have an issue, if you feel this way, then we have your back and we're going to support you on this. And so we came together and we created a writing and we were allowed space by the institution to insert our take on that cultural moment. And then what happened after that was we turned the Whiteness of Glass writing into a project that was funded by the Center for Craft in Asheville, North Carolina. We were fellows and we created this project to really turn this institutional trauma and convert it through artistic practice into something joyous and to really like show what art can do in communities and what we as artists, how we're well suited for these moments and critical in these moments. And this project is really like, it really is broken down into these segments to show how artists work and how important that work is.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add is that one of the things we were thinking about too is how do you take these traumatic histories, these kind of traumatic legacies of racialization, power, and approach them as artists might, and what is that? And so thinking about how we take something like DEI data, which is fundamentally information that's collected by the institution that is centered on lack and centered on loss, and how do we use that as a material to build something new, to build something like a creative imaginary amongst communities of color, instead of always centering our experiences within these kind of histories of lack. And so I think one of the things we were really thinking about is like, what is the role of the artist in social justice movements, like what we were seeing particularly in 2020, and that we kind of always come back to this idea that what we do is make things, and we make big things and little things, and that, you know, intervene in really complex histories and systems, but also are filled with joy, and that is actually also a really important part to kind of like play or to bring forward in this project. Yeah.
And I guess on the sort of mechanical level, so Nate was mentioning the New Glass Review article, Whiteness of Glass, and you'll see an example when you go to the exhibition, an example of the data pie charts that we had in that. And we realized that one of the other challenges around those data visualizations is often that they, because of the ways that they're centered on that experience of lack and sort of disconnect, that they don't necessarily communicate the experience of what it means to live through those experiences, and the impact that has on people. And so when we created the data visualizations that we then passed off to Cheryl and Pearl and Emily and the other artists, we wanted to create these sort of interpretive data visualizations. So the ones that you'll see in the gallery are ones that are, the titles to them are centered on potential experiences that people have gone through, and trying to interpret that through these drawings that use some of the language that you might recognize from those kinds of charts, but try to communicate a bit more about what it means to actually have to like physically contend with those experiences. And then that's what we then passed off to Cheryl to interpret.
Yeah. I mean, the data visualizations, the prompts for them, the language for them is so lived in. It is something that is hard to translate into hard numbers necessarily. And I think that, you know, certainly thinking of Du Bois's data portraits, I have it over here on my desk as a reference point. But at the same time, I think that there are things that are slippages, right, that don't necessarily have that concrete form. And so I guess from there, Cheryl, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your experience of creating an artist instruction based off of that prompt.
Thank you, Emily, and thanks to Related Tactics and everyone at Corning for including me today. Let me start by doing a shout out to Corning. Some of you know I was the inaugural BIPOC artist in residence in 2022. And so I appreciate the museum continuing to have meaningful dialogue about diversity within the field of glass. So thank you all for that. I'm going to start and just read the instruction. You know, the visualization I was given said, the struggle for people of color to identify legacies of the artists of color fractured and hidden by white supremacy. And so I thought a lot about that, and actually thought about a very, you know, often quoted or often stated sort of feeling, which is, you know we stand on strong shoulders, or I know I stand on strong shoulders. And so in creating an instruction for a glassblower, who I didn't know who the glassblower would be, I very much wanted to address this notion of standing on strong shoulders, but being obscured. And so the instruction I gave in brief started with picking a dark glass. You know, people in this room know as soon as you start with a dark glass, we're dealing with viscosity, it's gonna move. So you need a strong glass blower, whether that's black or that's indigo. So I was really lucky to get Pearl. And then also not wanting the structure to really look linear and sturdy, like standing on strong shoulders, but being more amorphous and getting at this obscured nature that the visualization instruction had given to me by Related Tactics.
Right on.
Pearl, would you like to speak about the collaborative studio environment?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Cheryl, for that. And hi, everybody, and hi, Related Tactics, and everyone at Corning, and Emily. It's so great to see you all, and thank you so much for having me here. It's really an honor to be here with you all. It was an honor to be a part of this project. I mean, when I even first saw the first part of this piece that Related Tactics put together in the New Glass review, I mean, it was amazing to see that included in that venue. It really showed just how underrepresented we've been, and and we've been traveling in a lot of the same circles. So we've seen each other, we're aware of each other's work, but then to see that data represented in that way, it was stark, and it was shocking, and it was really amazing to be able to see that. And then once I found out what the format of this project was going to become, and that I got to be a part of it, I was so excited. I was like, this is such a fun way to talk about this really like heavy emotional stuff that we're facing. Like it made me face this stuff by thinking about this project. And I was happy that, we could be a part of it in this really fun way as well. And so when I got the prompts, when I figured out that I was being paired up with Cheryl, like, first of all, it was this incredible opportunity for me to get to know her work better. So I got to do more of a deep dive into this artist's work who I respect, but I really got to go look into it. So, I was like, I want to know everything about you, Cheryl. I wanted to go check it out. And yeah, and I was inspired. So, it was something that right from the start, I was impressed by with this, that it was a way for us to connect with each other through this project. And there were just so many incredible artists that were involved that, I was just honored to be included and excited and excited for my part of it when I got to go and actually create with my friends in the studio and interpret Cheryl's words and thoughts. And I, on one hand, like I wasn't super literal, Cheryl, but I did follow your prompts pretty closely. And I really thought about like the idea of glass being like something that could obscure, something that was precarious. Like I wanted to create something. I actually ended up creating something that was in fact precarious. It was like balanced on each other. It was scraping around. I mean, Nate remembers when we put that thing up. It was just,
it was perfect.
It's a miracle that, yeah, it's still standing, which, I heard there might have been some issues with that, but it's traveled around now and it's still standing. But I got really lucky too that when I went to Tyler to actually get to interpret this piece, there happened to be like, so this idea that I had was this through line of this black glass, and then these amorphous blobs obscuring that black glass, and these black glass finials that I was looking to create. Like I pictured them being really technical and really beautiful, and hard to produce. And so I got to Tyler, and it turns out they had a tank of pitch black glass, this beautiful glass, and that Jason McDonald was a grad student there, and who is this really technical glass blower. Like I'm not as skilled as him in that way, but he was there, and while he wasn't like specifically part of this project, he was right there from the start, willing to jump in and help out, of course, because that's the kind of person he is. But he had a pile of these pieces in his studio that were exactly what I was thinking about. So getting to connect with him and to get to incorporate his expertise into this project was also just really, really special, really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting to see. I don't know if they're in the audience, but Davin Ebanks and Helen Lee have both talked a lot about how, I think, just feeling frustrated with language to describe what that feeling is, that communal space that you all were in of creating. And I think one thing that RT you've talked about is that there wasn't necessarily an expectation of coming out of that studio space with an end result, with like a fixed item or like object. Can you talk a little bit about just kind of that flexibility and that urge to prioritize the space versus the end result?
Yeah, I think it's maybe useful to also just back up and say quickly that we're a collective of 3. We work fully on consensus. So like, is the paperclip small or smaller? And then we have to like talk that out until we all get to the same place. And it is as painful and wonderful as it sounds. But we often align that work, that kind of work of consensus, with like social movements and movement building, and then what's needed to move movements forward. And so, and that kind of like hard work of just coming together and finding consensus. And so this whole project is this kind of like a game of telephone, right? Where we started these drawings, data visualizations, we pass those off to a set of artists who have no idea what they're getting, and we ask them to do a set of instructions that then get passed off to these studio artists who then come to the studio, and we just said, make things, whatever you want. And I think we often use curatorial strategies in our projects where we're kind of bringing lots of folks together to make things. And part of that process is just trusting that you never know what's going to happen. We never know what artists are going to come and bring to the table. That's part of the work of that. And I think that's part of the work of consensus building. It's part of the work of movement building. You have to just trust the people that are around you, that you bring to the table, and that if something unexpected comes, that's about you figuring out what is unexpected for yourself, not like them to justify what they've done. And so we really wanted every stage of this to be, like, for the artists to feel as autonomous as possible. I feel like we've spent a lot of time being like, no, you don't have to make a thing. Like, you really don't have to make you don't have to make an artwork. Like, just do whatever you feel. It doesn't even have to be finished. You know, you can do whatever. And everyone's like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean by not finished? And I think hopefully you'll come upstairs and see that like all the 6 artists took really different approaches to that. But I think the thing we often say is that we really thought everyone would leave they were only there for 3 days at Tyler. We really thought they would all make one thing, whatever that was. We left with 100 objects and images from basically 3 days of studio time. They worked like 24 hours. We were like, oh, you'll come in at 9, 10, you'll leave at 5. I mean, 2, 3 in the morning, folks getting in at 6 in the morning, people going home to their hotels, working at night. There was something about like really opening the door for everyone to respond how they wanted, and also then bringing them together to do so that created something we just did not expect at all.
And then the only thing I would add to that is that the way that we designed the installation was to include and demonstrate as much of that process as possible. So it's very centered on the ephemera of the process and the sketches, the drawings, the planning documents, the broken pieces of glass that were sort of developed during the studio time. And part of that, I think, is that the overall framework for the project really is about how do artists, as artists, how do we demonstrate the kind of world that we want to envision and that we want to invite people to be a part of, and that by including that kind of process-based material and opening up this so that it's not centered on like, let's all create polished, finished objects that will fit nicely in this vitrine. We want to have as much there for people to decipher and look at and learn from that process, and so that they can in turn maybe replicate this or do their own versions of this to create their own worlds and communities that need to be built in wherever they are. And so I hope that it's this sort of generative process, both from what we experience and what can happen from here.
Yeah, Artie, I mean, I know that so much of your practice also involves kind of extending out the same care that you have built for each other within your collective to the artists who participate and collaborate with you. And I'm sorry, your screen is currently a beautiful bouquet.
That makes sense.
But, it's very nice. So just so that you know what we're virtually experiencing. But I think that it's really lovely to see the way that these bridges have been built and continue to be built throughout the course of this project, moving into new spaces as well. And I'm kind of thinking about that tension between the word disclosure, which kind of is a word that suggests revealing private information and bringing it into the public, and the framework that you have on the gallery text on the wall, which is building a collective creative imaginary. And I think that those are both tense frameworks. I mean, they're in tension with each other, but they're both necessary for each other as well. And so I guess I'm thinking about, for everybody here, just kind of the roles of doubt, recognition, and trust within the scope of this project. I think that all three of those are really critical elements that inform like each stage of the project as well. So I guess just thinking about that, how do we build trust and who do we build trust with? And what does it mean for this exhibition to be at the Corning Museum of Glass? I know that's kind of a bulky question, but I just wanted to pass that along to any one of you who would like to take that.
I'll maybe try or start.
For sure.
Yeah, it's, to take things that are deeply personal, or to take painful things that we all experience individually, to even process that with family or friends takes some degree of trust. So it started kind of at the core, but to start to talk about your experiences and knowing that they're not shared experiences, that they might be even isolated or unique within a field, within a region. To have doubt about that is the reality of not having a lot of community to share that with all the time. So the thought begins and ends. It's complete doubt from the get-go. So to externalize that, I think, takes a lot of unique relationship, and then to move that out into the public sphere, it really takes sensitivity. It takes empathy, and I keep looking back and forth to the folks that support me in this, because I don't even think I could have this conversation without being flanked in this way. And then to turn it into something like really public that, of course, is going to be critiqued. That, for me, is just not. It's not who I am. It's not how I've built an art practice. My art practice is really to be subversive about these things, to say everything I need to know and have nobody really know exactly what that is. That's where my comfort is. But this collective does something very, very different. It inserts itself into institutions in a way that really can create dialogue and change. And that is not something that I would do alone. I would never do it this way. So just real quick.
Yeah, I think shifting that vulnerability of the individual into a collective space, there's so much more freedom within that. And again, just kind of dissolving the boundaries of the individual as well, and the kind of pains of the individual experience, I think is a really critical part of this project, and really beautiful to see as it continues to evolve. And I think that in many ways, this public stage is the most vulnerable one, but at the same time, it allows opportunities for us to connect like this. And so I'm just really grateful to see it as it continues to evolve. Cheryl and Pearl, I want to make sure that you have a chance to weigh in on that really bulky question that I just asked as well, but just thinking about trust and vulnerability and the significance of this exhibition. If either of you would like to talk about that. I know it's super
Cheryl, you want to go? You want to go first, or I can pop? Yeah, that is a loaded question.
Yeah.
I mean, I trust related tactics implicitly, and when we all got together in a room, that bond, that closeness that we had, even if people didn't know each other real well, it was palpable, and we quickly fell into this place of vulnerability in that, and I think that came because we had this shared history, and we had a trust that we would be honored, and the way these folks handled that handled us there, and they were so gentle. They were so gentle and so welcoming. They really created the space, as you said earlier, Nate, created the space for us to just be very vulnerable and open. And I think that was, I actually haven't seen the finished show live. Like, I've seen pictures of it, and I think it probably live would attest to like just what we felt comfortable to accomplish in that space. But it was just, yeah, it was really incredible. It was really special. And I think that safeness and that trust is what led to us being able to make that work, to be able to be there and do this. That's too, Cheryl.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, I know related tactics work. I know 2 of the 3 members very well, and looking forward to getting to know the member I don't know as well, even better. And, you know, I've seen the type of care that they take in their installations, having seen a couple of those. I certainly paid a lot of attention to the phrasing even of the prompt, and I thought it was very clear. And it wasn't confused, you know, because I think that's also a space when we get into the, you know, the thorny issues of race and place and equity. Like, it's easy for folk to want to be confused, and there was a lot of clarity in what they had written, so that built a lot of trust for me as well. And I think, you know, the broader issue about disclosure, you know, Pearl really hit it on the head. Until this happened, I didn't know her work. I was excited to learn about her work. You know, there were many other people in this show that I didn't know their work. And so I think it also, you know, was a community building opportunity as well. You know, I mean, it's no secret that a lot of us were having a lot of conversations after 2020, whether those were public conversations through New Glass Review or private conversations with glass organizations or glass studios that we had been involved with. And so I think to have now not just an article, but actually a show that's a model for what collaboration across racial and ethnic lines can look like in the community of fine craft is already making a really positive statement for the future of our field.
Can I chime with one very quick thought too? I just want to say I am proud of Corning for putting this exhibition up. And I do want to acknowledge, you know, the folks that were involved in helping to like fund this, help get us together, and that helped, you know, helped us realize this, helped us realize related tactics vision, and helped us to like come together. So I really want to acknowledge those folks that made that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have such limited time together. I have 100 different questions that I could branch off into, but I also want to make sure that the audience has a chance to participate as well. So maybe now is a good moment to transition into the Q&A, just to give you all the opportunity.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, everyone. I'm sure, I hope we're reeling, and truly, I think as you're learning, those of you virtually and in person, this is an exhibition that's going to leave you with more questions and thought than answers, and it's going to continue to be a process of something to consider. So with that being said, if anybody has questions, I want to offer the floor. We have 2 mics up at the front for those that are here live. You're welcome to come forward. That will allow our virtual audiences to hear you. I know it's smaller in here, and realistically, we could probably hear you. But if you come to the mic, you can ask a question, or those virtually, if you want to type it in, we can do that route as well. And maybe, I don't see anyone moving to the front at the moment, Emily. Okay, we have one question.
Let's start.
Yeah.
Welcome. Firstly, what you were saying, Nate, certainly resonated with me. And the work that your team has done, I think, is not just about having people of color or black people do art, but almost creating a protective bubble around them, saying this is a space in which yourselves will be valued, what you bring. And so by giving light to that, the act of putting that around them, so that when the work is looked at, it's interpreted as a genuine work of black art or person of color art. Could you speak more about that, what your vision is for the future, you know, years from now? What will people be able to take away? What's the enhancement that the team offers?
I think what we're looking for are those spaces to exist, more of them more often, because it was the energy, it was that conceptual space, it was the things that you can't see. Every studio looks the same, but there's an energy that runs through them. I think my hope is that there won't be this. We see what happened when that bubble is there and people feel safe and they feel protected. What you get is like something phenomenal, where there's no gravity in the room, it's weightlessness. And the support is so interconnected that for a second, anything's possible. And I think as artists and art lovers and museums and curators and people that want to see something new, exceptional, wonderful, like just incredible, we have to like allow artists to feel like their whole selves. And so like I don't have any visions for like an object, right? And that's why we didn't ask for these objects to be finished. Like there's no, I think it should look like this or be like that, but it's the space that allows things to be possible. And I hope that this is somewhat of a framework for us to understand that we actually have a lot of power to do these things differently. And that institutions that have this kind of power are the most important. Like if they can do it, then a lot of folks can do it. But if they don't do it, no one will do it. So that's kind of where I go with it.
Thank you.
I do have a virtual question for us, so I'll go ahead and read that while we're thinking. Thank you for the questions, virtual audience. Here's one. Cheryl mentioned that this exhibition is a model in the field of what collaboration across race and gender can look like. What would RT and participating artists want BIPOC learners approaching the field of glass to take away from this exhibition?
Cheryl or Pearl, I feel like
Yeah,
the
I know
question,
Cheryl or Pearl,
yeah.
do you want to chime in?
I'm sorry, I got distracted. I was reading what Helen wrote in the.
They said RT first, so you know that's why.
Can you repeat the question, Emily? Sorry.
There was an RT. You know, I think for people entering the field, I feel like this show is very much a continuum of understanding that you do have precedents. So if there's someone who is new to the field of glass, I'm not going to say younger, because some of us, you know, took their first glass blowing class at 39, but if, you know, you are coming newly into the field of glass, know that we are here. There are many people who are here, and I think that's part of building this legacy of allowing people to see not only our individual work, but our collective work within the field of glass.
I really actually do need you to repeat it. Sorry. I was like, I didn't hear the question.
The question was, what would you want BIPOC learners approaching the field of glass to take away from this exhibition?
I mean, like I've been talking to all of the young folks in my studio about this experience, and they were so excited about it. They were empowered by it. Just to see that this kind of collaboration can happen, and then to see how moved and emotional that I was, like how inspired and moved I was when I came back to our studio. Man, they were just, it looks like the future to them. It looks like a vision of the future to them. And it looks like a space that they have the power to create, and that is being created now. I mean, you know, all of the folks I think that were there working together, you know, we were all around the same age-ish, you know, all the kind of like, you know, we'd all been somewhat accomplished in our careers. We've been doing this for a while. And on one hand, I feel like they feel like you know, we're championing them a little bit, like we're paving the way a little bit more for them so that this isn't such a momentous, special thing that we cried doing because it was so momentous and special, but that it's just how it's going to be from now on. And like, I really feel like we took some steps to create that. So it's not, doesn't have to be rarefied. It can be something that is their experience without it having to be a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know that you were reading Helen's message.
I was reading Helen. It took me a minute to like, I was like, what, Helen?
Yeah, so just for those of you who aren't seeing the Zoom chat as well, yes, Helen, thank you for taking accountability for distracting our panelists. Helen wrote that it was a space sans distortions, which in turn meant that it was sans contortions. And I think that that's a really critical thing for us to carry forward for the next generation of glass studio artists as well. Yeah. And then, I don't mean to take this away from the people who are there in person, but there is another question that's in the chat right now. Do you all have any thoughts or reflections about the relation between complexity and clarity, how to be transparent while also keeping things for oneself? Is balance or harmony possible? And this is really interesting. One of the questions that I had chatted with the guys about a little bit earlier was about just what gets to be transparent, what needs to be, urgently needs to be transparent, and what has the opportunity to be opaque. So if we want to talk a little bit about what we keep to ourselves and what we share outward for a little bit, I think that's a beautiful question. Thank you.
I think that's a really good question. I feel like it's something that we still contend with, and I feel like we're constantly talking about, because you know the thing that sparked this project was about extraction, about hypervisibility, about the cooptation of one's image, and so we were very protective of that in especially putting together this end exhibitions when it's engaging with the public, and we made the decision, at least in this iteration, to not include images of people from the gathering, that, at least in the exhibition space, and that was very strategic and deliberate. And I think we've also had conversations with some of the artists who've pushed back on that and actually feel like it would be productive, especially for young people of color, to see that and to know that, like, the details of what that means, and to be inspired by the presence of people in spaces like that. So I think that's something that we haven't, I don't know that there's any one answer to that, but that it's something that we take very seriously and want to continue to protect and honor, that there's also parts of this that were about vulnerability and intimacy and care that were never meant to be about, like, extracting that back out to the public, that they were meant for that cohort, and that's a precious thing, and that we hope that that's demonstrated in the nuances of the work and the materiality of the work, but that does take a little bit of sitting with it and interpreting it and understanding with it. So yeah, it's a evolving question, I think.
Okay, I think we're going to read, Kathy has one from the chat.
Hi. This is a hefty question. So, can you envision an organizational infrastructure not related to donors and philanthropists, so that our operational infrastructure is not reliant on structural problems related to problematic capital? What other alternatives can there be? You can think about that.
I mean, I think that I don't know. But put that out there. If I did, we'd be in a different situation. No, but I do think it's an important question, and one we grapple with a lot as a collective, because we always kind of joke that we have, like, the TLC problem, where because there's 3 of us, all our funds get cut by 3. There's that MTV interview where they break down, you know, anyway, look it up, it'll be good. I know it dates me, but it's fine. But, you know, we often get brought into an institution as an artist, but there's 3 of us. And so we get a artist fee. And like if Weston went and did that same project as Weston, he would get the same artist fee, right? And so we're constantly kind of having to think about also like part of bringing folks in with care is making sure that they're supported to do so in terms of capital, right? That they can take a week or 3 days off of work, that they can pay for a plane ticket and know they're going to get reimbursed in, not 6 months from now. There are all these kind of structural things that we think a lot about in terms of this kind of, term care that I think also is getting kind of co-opty nowadays. Like care and safety are terms that we're grappling with a lot and thinking about like what that meaning is. And so I think that one of the things as a collective, in some ways we do kind of undermine like what an artist like career is, because you just kind of hitch your career wagon to 2 other people and all the things that 2 people bring to the day and their lives and how they think about their careers. But we also have each other's energy to, like, we can do 3 times the things. We can do projects together that we couldn't do on our own. We do have to then contend with, like, financial models and all sorts of structural models, and we resist that all the time. Everybody is often like, you should 501c3, are you a nonprofit, be an organization. We're like, no, we're not an organization, like we're not gonna have a board, we're not gonna do those things because we don't want to be hooked to donors, we don't wanna be hooked to boards. We wanna have like the nimbleness and flexibility, but at the same time, we still have all those kind of like challenges that just like artists, I assume many people in this room have. Yeah, I feel like I can like really spend a lot of time talking about like the models, but I don't know what the model is. I think we're people who both work inside models that exist, but also work outside of them. So I think there are also plenty of folks who are like, no existing models, we're gonna build something different, and I love that. And then I think we are people who kind of straddle both of those worlds because of our individual career paths and I think also what we're capable of. So we know that our experience individually allows us to work within institutions and be people who can push institutions to do better. And it's difficult work, but it's the thing that we're all 3 are actually trained for. And so we work within those spaces. We also work outside of them because we sometimes just need a different, we need a different model, and we're constantly trying to think about building those.
Really inspiring. I see one more. Go ahead, come on, if you can come up. We had you will also get your question as well. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Yep.
Okay.
These will be our last 2 questions, just for reference, to be mindful of time. Please.
First of all, thank you all so much for taking the time to talk about this body of work with us all today. Throughout your discussion, I was kind of flooded with thoughts of like where this sits in the vein of art history and like the conceptual movement and your use of words and this kind of even article writing, and that being a big kind of catalyst for this work. But I want to kind of cycle around these 2 words, instruction and translation, and how I was wondering if you can speak to it in regards to like, is it using these things as tools as a way to maybe reconstruct social conceptualization and balance and injustice, but how do you see these kind of as tools, the instruction and translation?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I know from my perspective, I like giving people instructions. So, just broadly speaking, it is something I like. But I also feel like I'm a visual artist, studio artist, but I'm also a writer. And I think text is a form that I use frequently. I also think that for me at least, I'm often very inspired by like Fluxus instructions, folks like Yoko Ono and like her book Grapefruit. Those are like prompts and texts that I use in all my classes that I teach, like across the board. I think there's interesting ways that text becomes this kind of vehicle for just asking someone to think a little differently about something that they do every day. And I think we use it as that kind of vehicle. Like, we're thinking a lot about, like, how do we bring all these different folks together and ask them to share something? And it doesn't have to be like all the legacies and histories of trauma or all their hopes and dreams. It can just be like, stand in the corner and think about that corner differently. But like we think about that in alignment with all these kind of movements for social change. Sometimes those like really small asks to just see the world differently are really, really crucial, and ones we often overlook and bypass for like the big answers. And so I think that's kind of how we often use prompts that are instructions and sometimes they're just kind of reflections or poetics.
And I think there's something about, I'm intrigued by this, the way you highlighted translation, because there's something about that that's both asks for an empathetic response and this generative response, where it requires someone to have to get into the other person's mind and or mindset and really like understand it, spend some time with it, and then produce something from that and imagine something out of that. And so there's something about that that feels, again, like another kind of model that maybe hopefully can be translated beyond just like this artistic process, but how can that be disseminated throughout society as a process that we encourage and hope can live in other forms.
Yeah, it's I think the instruction gets us off the couch and it brings the group together. And that translation is the thing that artists do, but it also gives us an opportunity to hear each other go through that process. So to create that shared experience, there has to be an outward expression of what's happening, or else it remains internalized and we don't have a way to all observe what's happened together as a group to decide how we feel. And we don't all have to talk about it all the time, but I think having those conversations outside of your own body and having spaces that allow that dialogue to happen are important, and those words are a catalyst.
Thank you. I want to offer our last question. Can you come up to the mic so we can all hear you? Thank you. And then we'll be wrapping up this evening with a few things.
First, I want to say thank you for what you do, and thank you for having this event. And I've heard some key words: future, youth, and seeing things through different eyes. I am raising a couple of future artists of color. And so I'm looking, you know, I know you just did this, so this is new, this is fresh. But I don't know if it would be just as beneficial to do it with the youth, you know, with the future. And so I'm just interested in to see if there's anything coming down the pike for the younger, you know, one's 9, one's 12, and even if it will be easier because they're not established, they don't have a type or a, you know what I mean, so that they can collectively come together as they're learning themselves. So that's my question.
I mean, we don't have anything coming down the pipeline that is specifically youth focused. I think like in our practices, related tactics, we don't really focus on youth, working with youth and community for not like a strategic reason. I think we haven't necessarily done that. I know we work with, you know, young college students, so we work with young adults in that way often. And then that's kind of more of our wheelhouse. I'm always one of those professor teachers who's like, the people who work with young children are a very special group of folks and are very skilled and trained. And, you know, I need, like, how I operate in a class of 19-year-olds is a really different vibe. So I'm always very kind of wary to step in and assume that that we could translate our project to like a group of youth, because that work is really like strategic and important. I would say that like our model for this project specifically is telephone. You know, it's kind of like massive exquisite corpse vibe. Like anyone could do that, anyone could take that, and I think we would encourage you to do that. You know, like we are kind of always borrowing models that exist in the world and rethinking them, and Like if you know, this kind of thing, you know, it seems like something useful, we would really encourage you to take it and do it and let us know how it goes. But
I'm curious, Pearl, I know this is kind of your field of work, if you have any thoughts.
I wish that the person who asked the question could, I wish we were a little closer. I'm out here in Chicago, but I wish you could come to our shop and bring your young artists of color into our studio here, Firebird, because it's not as directed, it's not as intentional as what Related Tactics has put together and, you know, gathered us all to do. But it really is the work that we're doing every day, is creating a space where young folks can come and feel very welcomed, very safe, and where they have a space where most of the people look like them and have experienced a lot of the same things that they've experienced. And it is everything. And it I think it helps in so many ways, not even just in training young artists, but, you know, for folks just to feel you know, like really part of something and that people really see them. So if you can get to Chicago, come to Firebird, come visit me. Yeah, it's really special in that, you know, a lot of our young folks they've not seen other studios that are out there. They don't know just how special it is. It's what they know. And I love that. I don't love that the rest of the studios don't all look like ours, but I love that they don't know that every studio doesn't look like ours. Meanwhile. Come on out to Chicago.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's hard for me to wrap it up, but I want to be mindful of everyone's time. Thank you for your questions. And I just wanted to add one note. I mean, in a way, in terms of connecting with younger audiences, we've already had I already had 3 high schoolers that came through the space, right? We were talking about that. And what's, you know, you're expressing this vulnerability of putting it out there and putting it in the format of the exhibition. You are educating that work and you're doing that work. And there's going to be, we have a fabulous education team that already has educators coming in to learn about this exhibition. So I know and I trust that there will be younger generations coming through these galleries that are going to see the significant difference that this exhibition carries, especially when you walk up and you go through the Contemporary Art Design Wing and then you move into the Special Projects Gallery. There's a stark difference, and I can't wait to be a fly on the wall to hear all the conversation that comes up. So that work is going to come through in this way, and I hope we can foster as many of those opportunities as we can, and I know our education team is spot on, so that will happen. Few closing things as I thank you all. Again, those of you that are here, we do want you to join us upstairs, the Contemporary Art Design Wing and the Special Projects Gallery. You will also have the availability to get a copy of the catalog, which is free and accessible to you all. And those of you that are joining virtually, you can access that for free online. It's on our exhibition website, so you can browse through that and you can access that at any point. As a frame of reference, I know someone mentioned wanting to see maybe installation images. We would love to try to get some of those on view in the exhibition page too. I know if you're far away, it's hard to get to Corning. We're in a niche space. So we do want to try to make this as accessible as possible. That will be a goal of our team. What was the other thing I was going to add? Oh, yeah. For those of you that are here, we'll head upstairs. Those of you virtually, again, I hope you can come in. I want to just pause for a moment and say thank you, Michelle, Nate, Weston, Pearl, Cheryl, Emily, and all of the participating artists. Actually, Victoria is also a participating artist who's here and is an artist in residence right now at the studio, which is really exciting. So we're very fortunate of the impact this project has and that it has trickled all over. And you can really feel it in different communities. It's something I keep thinking about. So thank you all for your time. Thank you for grounding this exhibition to start in such deep conversation. Can't wait to see the life of this exhibition as it evolves here at the museum, and our team's working hard to capture that, captivate in that, and really own in on what it means to have this here. Thank you all. I think we're good. We're going to wrap up. So thank you all. Round of applause for our speakers. Thank you. Yeah, you're all good. So we'll head up. You can go out either side. Restrooms are over here, and then we can make our way up to the galleries. Thank you all.
See y'all soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Great to see you, Cheryl and Emily.
You too. Nice to meet you, Emily. Bye-bye.
Really lovely to meet you.